Hey, it's your host Dan. We're up to part 20 of the C4 front end crash repair. I'm doing myself DIY, and in this segment I'm going to be blocking the front end of the vehicle. And really simply put, if you don't know what that means, blocking the car out, it's the process of making the surface perfectly flat and level. If you remember in one of the previous videos, I used a palm sander with 80 grit just to get the bulk of the old paint off because it was so badly checked it had to be removed. The blocking is going to now further enhance the surface and make it perfectly flat and smooth again. Here's an example of something that's perfectly flat and smooth. Window glass on the back of my car. Note that the lights above, when I move around, they don't distort. You don't have a funhouse effect. The corners are nice and crisp, and this looks laser straight. That's what we want to achieve by blocking the hood to get the front hood and nose to look just like this. To block the car, I'm going to be using this kit from Durablock. It's a 7-piece kit. They're about $50-$60. Comes with various assorted blocks in here. Like for instance, this is the 11-inch block. These thicker ones are going to be very rigid. They're going to have only a slight bit of flex to them, only but when you put them under pressure. For the most part, they're going to stay true and flat for razoring off that surface. There's a 16-inch version of that and also a 5.5-inch version. Here's a little bit of a same length as the 11-inch, but it's thinner, so this will give you some flex here. There's also a round block here for getting in some of the curved surfaces, and also a flatter block like this. The sandpaper you can purchase on a roll. It's PSA, kind of like a peel stick. You pull some off the roll, cut it to size, stick it on the block, and there you go. If you're having trouble reading fine print at times or normally, and you're going to block sand, you absolutely have to wear your glasses when you do this process. Otherwise, you are wasting your time. Also, in conjunction with the glasses, if you need them, get one of these. Just get a little $10 magnifying glass, and this is going to allow you to see all the detail that's present that your hand is not going to pick up. You're going to be able to identify scratch patterns of, let's say, per se 80 grit to what 220 would look like, and this is also help you identify if you didn't pull out any further sanding scratches. I think that these are invaluable tools for you to get the job done right and get the job done correctly, because if we can't see what we're doing, we don't know what we're doing. Now that you've made sure your peepers are in proper working order, your next best friend is going to be what's called a guide coat, and a lot of people know what that means already, but if you don't, you'll use like a cheap, inexpensive throwaway spray paint. A lot of people use a flat black, and you'll spray a light dust coat across the surface. This will reveal your imperfections in the panel. You'll see your high spots, your low spots, the scratches from the previous sanding step. You'll know when you need to keep sanding and when it's done. So in other words, you're going to know when to hold them and when to fold them as far as how much you need to sand. Here's the headlight doors, and only one of them is ready to go for primer. The other one's not. Can you spot the difference and see which one needs a little bit more work done to it? And now I sanded these about a month or two ago, and I thought they were both ready, and that's the key word there, thought they were both ready. And it wasn't until I double checked my work, and really it wasn't until I used this, and I looked at the surface real close just to check the scratch pattern, and I found that this one here on the left, this is the one that needs more work. The surface is level, but it's not flat, if that makes any sense. The texture kind of looks almost a little leathery. When I go over to the other one that I just blocked out and guide coated with 320, the scratch pattern is perfectly even. The surface is perfectly flat, and even using my spectacles and a magnifying glass, I can see that. So I'm going to have to apply a guide coat to this panel and reblock it in 320. Most people are going to be using a flat black for their guide coat, but that'll be if you're using it over a gray primer, so that way you can see the scratch lines in black contrasting on gray primer. My parts are in black primer, so I don't want to use black because that makes it a lot harder to see. You want to use a contrasting color for your guide coat. So therefore, I would think to flip all the way to the other end of the spectrum and use a white guide coat. But since I have fiberglass parts, here you can see the gel, that's white. So if I spray this with a white guide coat, it's going to be harder to see white on white. So I chose to get a contrasting color, a kind of a different paint. I had to pay a little more for it. I couldn't get it in flat, but whatever, it works. I got like a light green because I want to be able to see the guide coat not only on the black primer but also on the gel coat parts too. So I'm just going to shake this up and just give it a little dust coat. Yeah, that's the idea. Just dust coat it. You're not painting the whole panel. Well, that's probably a little too much. There. That's all I need for the dust coat. And I'll just let this dry for about 5 minutes and then I'll start block sanding it. Okay, it's time to start blocking it. Now, this panel has a little bit of a curve to it. It almost looks flat, but it's not. So I don't want to use one of those harder, thicker, rigid blocks because it's not going to cut evenly across the surface. I need something that has just a little bit of a give to it. And I decided to use this block. As you sand and the guide coat gets clogged up in the paper, just get like a little simple brush and just brush it off. You want to make sure you keep those boogers off of there because it will not sit flat and sand evenly on the panel. But as I keep going very lightly, the guide coat is telling me what areas I need to sand more. The areas where it's all completely removed, like right here, that might have been slightly high, and areas over here where I can still see guide coat, that's probably going to be a little bit low in that area. So I'll just kind of keep sanding there very lightly, see if I can remove the guide coat without going down too far, because you know this is fiberglass, so I do not want to hit this gel. I really don't want to be sanding on top of the gel if I can all avoid it. It's also a good idea all the time too to wipe the dust off, because once the dust starts building up, then it makes the sandpaper sit up higher. Definite low spot right here and right there. See if we can keep going. You know, there's only one of two answers here. When you see a low spot on a panel, you either can keep sanding, and you don't want to sand into the spot, you just make it worse. The only way you fix that is to sand around it, leveling it, bringing it down to the level here, if that makes any sense. If that doesn't work, your only other option is to fill it and then resand it. It's as simple as that. If you can't sand it out, you got to fill it out. But I think I can get these out, maybe going just a little bit further on them without creating too much of a problem, because once again, I'm working on fiberglass. This is not like working on metal where I could kind of just go right down to the metal like a backboard. You know, the minute I get into that gel, it's going to sand pretty much just about the same as almost, I don't want to say paint, but it's kind of chalky. It's not like you have, you know, some substrate behind you to really keep you from doing too much damage like steel. Okay, the spots over here are almost gone. Not quite, but almost. I'm getting there. Okay, I'm all done with the 320 blocking step, and it took me a little while here on this panel because I didn't realize it at first, but the 320, it wasn't cutting the mustard. It was not aggressive enough to get down there and get that little textured surface off some of the previous scratches that were in there that I didn't see. And I think one thing I failed to do is I forgot to use a guide coat between 80 and 220 on this panel. I just, for some reason, I just didn't think I needed it. But you do need it, and you really need to use it between every single sanding step. This way you don't have to backtrack. Now, since I backtrack like that, that little spot is getting a lot bigger, and I want to stay off this gel. I want to avoid it at all costs. I really don't want to be sanding on it. So I think this, I'm at the point where I need to stop, because the texture that was around the edges, I've got it about 90-95% removed, where if I look with my little microscope here, I can see the nice perfect scratch pattern of the 320. and only just a tiny bit of the texture. So I'm gonna, fingers crossed, that the primer is gonna fill in that 5-10%. And also another thing I noticed too with black primer, it almost kind of guide coats itself. Like for instance, if I take my finger and I wipe some of this away and it's clean, as I'm sanding and the dust goes over that, like it is over here, you can kind of use that as your guide coat. It's a lot harder to, you know, see, and you really have to pay attention than using something like a light and a dark color where they contrast, but it can be done. So I'm gonna stop on this panel for now, and I'm gonna call this one primer ready. After redoing the headlight doors, I redid the bumper once again. I blocked it in 320, and you know, despite it looking like it's kind of camouflage looking, like it's getting worse, it's getting better. We're just that one thin layer of paint away off the top of the bumper. It's a lot smoother. I think there's some things I didn't miss now that I really double checked it and re-examined it. I'm glad I took the extra time and gave it a second sand. Next up was block sanding the hood, and be perfectly honest, I was a little bit apprehensive on getting started doing the hood because, well, it's got all these curves and swoopy parts, and it's flat in just a few places, but you know, there's these radiuses, and like for instance here over the fender, it's a little bit convex, and right up here it's a little bit concave, and of course you got the little, you know, parts where it goes up for the scoop, and it's pretty much flat right about here. So I had to figure out a way, how am I going to attack this, you know, because you just don't want to start sanding in just one place and then move to another place and move to another place. You have to have some kind of systematic system of getting it done. And I decided to break the hood up into sections. So this would be like one section, this would be like one section, the back part on the side would be another section, and then I would do just over the wheel wells one section. And this I could almost maybe get in one section, but I decided to break it up into two because of that convex concave thing going on, and same thing on the top of the hood. So I did each section at a time. This half of the hood has been now blocked in 180, and it's looking a lot smoother. It's feeling a lot smoother, that's for sure. And I did the same thing over here on the side with the guide coat. I sprayed some on this panel here, and as I was blocking it down, this started opening up right here. It started going down to the gel, and you can see this little bit of the green paint here that's still there. And when I was doing this with the finish sander, I was like, is that gonna need filler? And I'm like, yeah, it needs filler. I mean, I can feel it right there. So I'm gonna have to sand this down, and you know, I'll probably use some glazing putty in here. It's very, very slight. We're talking like 5/1000ths of an inch, maybe 10/1000, somewhere in there. It's hardly anything, but that'll have to be filled in. And also right here, there was something weird going on in the paint with this hood. When I very first got it, I didn't know what it was. It looked like it was kind of like bubbling, the paint right here, but there's some cracks right here in the gel coat. I'm gonna have to address these. I'm probably gonna have to grind them out and fill them, but I sanded this spot down a little bit to expose them more to see what I'm dealing with. And right here on the, let's see, where is it? Yep, right here, top of the fender, same thing. This is a tiny little crack right here. I'm gonna have to probably grind this out. You could see this in the paint, and as I was sanding it, I was like, oh, it's sanding out, yay, and then no, once I got to the primer, that's gonna be a crack in the gel too, so I'm gonna have to sand that down and get that out. But I've got this side done in 180. The other side still kind of looks like a minefield. The Bondo here, I was almost going to sand this completely out, but I'm starting to get a little bit of like a gel ring. I've kind of already cupped it just a little bit. I'll fill this in with some glazing, but I was hoping this isn't like going to go through to the other side or some crap like that, and it seemed to be okay, so I'm just going to go over the top of this. Otherwise, I think if I start, you know, wanting to get every last bit out of it, I don't know how far down the repair went, whoever did this repair. I mean, if it's into the panel itself, I might just be making a mess of it, and it's probably easier just to skim over the top of it. So I have the driver's side blocked out in 180, and it feels really smooth. You can hear it compared to the other side. Right here, I can feel a low spot, a dip right here. And obviously this has gone down to the gel coat here. And, you know, some of this didn't really make sense to me at first. Some of the patterning, I mean, obviously this is gel and obviously this is primer, but you start looking at this and, you know, it starts getting all squirrely. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to block down this side, kind of like a mow down, and I'm going to get it down to the factory primer that's just right on the first layer that's right above the gel coat. I'll probably be either on top of it or into it. And here on this side, like anywhere where I've hit the gel coat, I think I'm going to preemptively put a little bit of glazing putty on here, because I can already feel it's low. So that way when I go over and I block it with the 180, it'll already be filled in. I won't be making extra work for myself. But like right here, for instance, we're going from gel to primer to anywhere there's this dark area that's either going to be, you know, like right where the base meets the primer, or still some of the base coat on there. So I'm going to have to block it down 180, do a mow down on this side, and get it as smooth as the other side. So I got my work cut out for me. It's going to take me probably a day or two to get this side of the hood ready. Okay, that's a wrap for now. So next time we'll come back, we'll continue blocking. I still have to do the hood in a 320 step to block that out, and I have to fix those cracks by grinding those out and filling those in on the side of the fender. Hope you enjoyed watching the video, and as always, thanks for watching.